Welcome to episode 8 of Talking Money. I'm very pleased to welcome back Hannah Godfrey. Hannah, we've got 3 fantastic stories to talk about this week. We're going to start with, I guess, the one that's been capturing an awful lot of headlines, certainly when it comes to the world of investing in the last few weeks, and that's GameStop. Had you heard of GameStop before this all happened? Because I'm not sure I had.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's just the US equivalent of Game, the retail store.
Mm.
That's all it is. It's not a big kind of American brand that we've all heard of and we interact with and we have here in the UK, but it's a phenomenal story. I mean,
Mm.
it really has captured just the hearts and minds of everybody. And I always love this when it happens when it's to do with things about like investments and kind of nerdy things like money. And this
Mm.
is particularly complicated. I mean, this is
Oh,
the
yeah.
stock market, shorting the stock market. Hedge funds are involved. It's for somebody non-financial, that's a load of jargon that you're like, what? None of that means anything.
Yeah.
Um, and yet suddenly everyone wants to talk about it. I think it's phenomenal. I love this story.
Me too. You're right, though. There is a lot of jargon involved. If I try and do the potted sort of version of what's taken place, because I think having explained it, and it's become such a popular story. I've now spoken to, I think, 8 journalists about this. Which is a lot for one story for me. I mean, 2 or 3 is a lot, but 8 is an awful lot. So to try and sort of condense it and explain what's happened, GameStop, I think of a fairly unloved business. It wasn't doing particularly well. It's a bricks and mortar retailer. It doesn't really have an online presence. And as a result of it being unloved, you have these hedge funds, so institutional investment managers, who are effectively betting that the value of that company is going to go down or go to zero. So they do what's called shorting the company. And if you short a company, it's more complicated than that, but you borrow the stocks off somebody, you borrow the equities off somebody, and you sell them in the expectation that you can buy them back at a cheaper price a bit later and give them back. So you make a profit in that difference when the value goes down. It's quite simple in practice. And when it works, you can make an awful lot of money doing it. So there's this group of amateur investors on a message board called Reddit, which some people may have come across, and they're on a subreddit thread called Wall Street Bets. And for the past couple of years, actually, this isn't a brand new thing, but for the past few years, they've been keeping an eye on hedge funds and this shorting activity. And they just want to stick it to the man, I think it's fair to say. They want to really hurt the hedge funds because there was an open letter last week explaining that a lot of these investors grew up during the '08 financial crisis and they saw the devastating economic impacts of the global financial crash. They feel that hedge funds are responsible. So what they've been doing is trying to push the value of GameStop and GameStop and a few other stocks really high, because it's called a short squeeze. It means that the hedge funds who hold those shorts are panicking really because they have to buy them back at a much higher price, and it's been incredible. I hope that was an okay explanation. It's a complicated story, and there's a lot more to it than that. But what sort of things have you sort of seen about this, and what's it made you think about?
It has made me think about all sorts. This is actually I was trying to write notes as I always do before these podcasts, and I was setting it out, and I'm so pleased you explained it because as I was going through it before, I was thinking, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start explaining something, and then I'm going to be on a tangent explaining what this Reddit thing is, and then back
Yeah.
to hedge funds, and it's not going to make sense to anybody. So I'm very happy that you explained it. I I completely, the more I read about this, the less I feel that I know. It's one of those things where a lot of these concepts are quite new to me as well. I'm not an investment journalist. I have had the pleasure of never writing about a hedge fund in my life
Mm.
before the last couple of weeks. I'm not particularly a Reddit user. I am definitely what I'm sure the bros on Reddit would consider a normie. Like I don't browse these forums. So this is a very new world for me. Um but it speaks to so many of the issues that are at play currently that we can see in more ordinary life as you look around you, and
Yeah.
the idea that there is so much fury still towards Wall Street because people haven't forgiven what happened for 2008. And I know it was a global financial crisis, but I think in the United States, particularly, a lot of people were very, very badly affected, like made homeless, kind of badly
Yeah.
affected. And I read some really heartbreaking stuff on there. There was one post about a guy who was saying you're not poor until you've learned how to make soup out of ketchup or something like that. Like
Yeah.
it was genuinely heartbreaking stuff. And you never know how much of it is genuine, because most of these people are totally anonymous. You have no idea who they are. They could be making the whole thing up. They might not even be investing. But if we take it at face value, I felt this genuine kind of like kinship. Is that yeah, that's what the word I'm looking for, kinship, with these people that had this, what they perceived as just this opportunity to, yeah, to stick it to the man. Let's just bring them down because we can on this occasion. And it worked. These hedge funds that were involved, one of them I think has completely gone bust. There's another one that's had to borrow from other competitors to the tune of billions in order to stay afloat. They did what they set out to do. They squeezed them till, they couldn't stay in any longer. um where this gets more complicated is, as lovely as that story is, and that will be the reality for a lot of these people that are on this forum, there are further questions about, is this very effective? Will it change regulation? Can it happen again? I know I watched your video that said analysts had kind of been sat there going, we've got to make room for this almost, and it could aid active management. But I don't think it will happen again. Actually, I think there was a particularly unique set of circumstances that no longer exist already. And so I think there's still so many questions to be asked about this. But I'm curious what you think about this, because you and I, it feels natural that I would be more sympathetic and kind of sit with the Redditors. But I'm still kind of going, I feel sometimes like I don't know enough. And I'm not even sure sticking it to the hedge funds, if you're going to stick it to the man, I'm not sure they're the man to stick it to, if that
Yeah,
makes
it
sense.
does. It does make sense, and it's been, from my perspective, and I class myself as a professional investor, so I'm ultimately responsible for looking after £500 million worth of client assets. I understand what's going on here. I think to hopefully a better degree than many of these amateurs that talk about it on Reddit, and I'm not convinced that they're not being played to some extent. I think possibly there's an element of what we call a pump and dump scheme taking place. So there was a way of talking up the value of this stock. Some people becoming very, very rich off that activity. And then in the last few days, to sort of give an indication of where this has gone, it started off at about $18 a stock. It went up to $347 a stock very quickly, which is huge, huge growth. And now it's slipped right back down to 96. So it's still, 3-4 times higher than it was at the start. But people who were putting loads of money into this, life savings, etc., into it, would have lost substantial amounts of money. Possibly because there were some bad actors involved on this Reddit forum who were helping to talk it up, taking their profits and running away, and sort of treating it a bit like a game, an opportunity to do that. The other thing I think it's exposed is a lot of the trading activity was taking place via platforms that we've spoken about before, Robinhood, for example, and it's a commission-free trading platform. But of course, they make their money somewhere else. And what they were making their money doing was selling what's called their order flow to institutions like hedge funds. So people were able to hedge funds were able to front run these trades and actually profit off the trade. So I think it's possibly a little naive of some of these Reddit investors to believe that they were sticking it to the man, and that actually ultimately from all of this, it's not the billionaires who are going to benefit still. I saw a fantastic comment earlier, somebody saying, we're going to beat the billionaires. And actually, I think if you take that attitude, you sort of fail to keep in mind that the billionaires are billionaires. They've already won. They are billionaires already. They've done pretty well already, and they've done pretty well for a reason. I honestly think that there's a lot more to come out of this story once all the numbers have been unpicked and people step forward and tell their story. It's not as simple, sadly, as David versus Goliath and sticking it to the hedge funds. I think whilst one of the hedge funds may have been quite pained by all of this, actually they're going to do okay in the end and possibly do even better as a result of it. But the order flow thing, the Robinhood thing is particularly interesting, and lots of people are getting very angry with Robinhood and others because they stopped them from buying at some points. And that was because they couldn't cover their trades, because it takes time to settle these trades and to get the cash back out, and they just couldn't cover it.
Was that definitely the reason? Because I've spoken to various people about this, and there was kind of some people were saying, well, there's vested interests. You know,
Mm,
there are large players, large actors, names that you will have heard of before that have a certain stake in things like Robinhood, and so there's this vested interest in not allowing people to trade. None of this is anything that is, I don't think, provable, but
mm,
it's there's so much distrust, I think, as well for the larger institutions.
yeah.
And my boyfriend and I were having a long chat about this last night because he's got super into it as well, which is another thing that's been interesting because people that don't really talk about investment or have anything to do with investment suddenly want to know everything about investment, which I think could be a good thing actually in the long run.
Mm,
Um, but we were talking about this and we were just saying that it's so difficult to know what to trust and what information you're reading to really back. And I think I think the problem right now is that we just don't know the full story
no, no.
behind it. That's the issue. And so there's a lot of theories that are going on and a lot of stories, some of which, like the David and Goliath, that are quite kind of romantic
Mm,
and all these kind of, although it's not gone terribly well for them, as we know, the stock is tumbling today last time I checked.
mm.
um but what remains to be seen, I think, will be what regulation comes out of it.
Yes, that for me is the interesting one, and there are conspiracy theories going around there that, for example, the people that pay Robinhood, because it's not the users who pay, but someone else. And there's that famous saying, isn't there, that if something is free, you're the product. And I think that's exactly it with Robinhood, with other commission-free trading platforms. Actually, if something's free, it's usually very expensive. You just have to work out how you're paying for it. So there's these conspiracy theories going around saying that whoever pays for Robinhood is stopping it and manipulating the markets. I think that's unlikely just because I know how tough regulation is, particularly in the US. They've got the SEC over there who are, they have teeth. We're talking, as well as $1 billion fines, we're talking prison sentences if you try and manipulate markets. I honestly don't think any of these established institutions would go that far, even if it meant one of their peers failing because they'd lost billions.
Do
Um,
you just out of interest then, a lot of one of the arguments that's going round a lot is that it's not really fair that the Redditors and whatnot were accused of kind of manipulating markets, because you can make the argument that the hedge funds were manipulating markets in the first place. So
mm,
how do you square that circle? Do you feel like there's any element of unfairness, or for you as somebody that knows a lot about investing, is this kind of a narrative for you that yes, it does exist, it does
mm.
exist to these people, but in reality this is a whole mixture of regulation and moving parts that aren't as nefarious as perhaps people think they are?
Yeah, possibly to some extent. I mean, I'm not going to ever claim that the hedge fund sector they're not angels, and you only have to watch Billions on Sky Atlantic to sort of see that's based on real characters. It's fictional, but it's based on real stories and real characters. So it's not a perfect sector. There are a lot of very bad characters within it. But I think there's probably wrongdoings on both sides. The difference to me seems to be if there's a wrongdoing on the institutional side, the SEC in the US or the FCA in the UK, they will take action, they will identify it, because all of these trades are recorded. It's not like you can sort of do them secretly and pretend you weren't involved. Every trade you place is recorded. In America, the regulators, the Justice Department, etc., can see those trades, and they will take out. People do end up in prison for doing this if they do it wrong. Whereas the Redditors, I think it would be much harder for the regulators to look for market manipulation if there was a pump and dump scheme. Yeah, I think you mentioned a moment ago, these are anonymous comments. You don't know who's telling you to, send this stock to the moon and have diamond hands and hold on to it and the rest of it. That could well be the hedge funds telling you, or it could be somebody who's just trying to inflate the stock price and then get out at the right time to make themselves rich at the expense of everyone else. The story will come out. I'm looking forward to sort of watching the documentary and reading the book at some point in the future, because it will be fascinating.